So we use our app for everything. We configure using our app. We commission with our app. So you do need to use our mobile application. It is free through the iOS or Android store. So you can download it, try it out. It's pretty easy to use. The first step is creating a user. So when you enter a username, the admin login is actually in the format of username at username. So when you enter a username, I would suggest you make it something to do with the project you're doing. If you're installing in a hospital, just you could have it as San Diego Scripps Hospital as the username, and the login will be SD Hospital at SD Hospital, let's say. The reason we do this is because the second username in this format is what we call the organization name. And the first quote unquote username is the actual user themselves. So when you create more users under this login, the first part will change, but the second org username will stay the same. So under this same example, if I created a login for John Doe, his login will be John Doe at SD Hospital or something like that. So I would recommend putting in some thought in the username and just not having it some your company name or something like that, or else your customer might log in with your company name and it might be a little weird. Yeah, user registrations there. We also have user management. We have two different kinds of controls. You can have control user management or configure user management, where configure allows users to modify the settings of devices, while control, they can only turn on and off the lights, dim the lights, and stuff like that. So after you create your admin login, you're able to create more users under your organization. This is kind of how our building management setup looks like. We have your organization and login at the very bottom, and each login, you can put multiple buildings. Each building can have multiple floors. Each floor can have multiple zones, and the zone is where the devices are located in. So you can have up to 4,000 zones in a floor, 4,000 floors in a building, and 4,000 buildings per login. So it can go from up to 16 million devices, I believe it is, which is a lot. And I don't see you guys ever having a project or login with that many devices. And you're able to go through each of these devices, floors, or zones through the app in the device tab. It's the screen on the right, and you can navigate through those. For commissioning, we have something called commissioning settings. That stuff like security code, app output channel settings, and power settings. The security code is basically there to not allow other people to commission the devices that have already been commissioned into your account. Not many people use this option. Usually it's default 4 zeros and they leave it like that, but it's there just in case your customers want more security. We also have output channel settings, which basically changes the devices from single channel to color tuning devices. It's mostly a visual thing on the app, so they don't see a color tuning bar and only see an intensity bar. Yeah, so these commissioning settings are on the commissioning page, which is right here. You can see on the under device commissioning, there is a gear symbol where you can find that previous page. For commissioning, we have something called a pairing mode, where this is the only time the devices are in a state where they can be paired and commissioned into your account. The pairing mode lasts around a minute plus, depending on which device you're using. For gateways, it does last longer because you have to enter like Wi-Fi settings and all that different stuff. But usually it's around a minute, and it's the first minute after the device is powered on is where you can commission the devices. So once the device is powered on, you can see it in the search bar on the commissioning page, and you can just add devices by pushing the plus button. You are able to do bulk or individual commissioning. I do prefer individual commissioning because you'll be able to change the name of the device you're adding so that you know what it's called and it's not just device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to like 100. So it's a lot easier to do it that way if you can. So this is the devices page that you go to after commissioning is done. You can find the device tab at the bottom of the screen here on the bottom left, and it just lists all the devices in alphabetical order. There is a search bar where you can search for your devices to make it easier. And you can click on the sun icon next to our controller devices. This is where you can control dim, turn on and off the light. If you click on the gear symbol next to the device, you'll able to see all the settings you can do. Stuff like motion sensor settings, daylight sensor settings. These I would recommend doing in the groups tab that I'll go through later. But for now, the main thing to look at is the light configuration settings. This is where you'll be able to change the high-end trim and low-end trim of devices to limit their output. If we move on to groups, groups you can find at the bottom tab as well, circled in red. Every device you put in a group will respond to all the sensors and switches in that group. So it's pretty easy if you have 10 controllers and one sensor in a group, all 10 controllers will listen to that one sensor. So anything you want to work together, just put them in a group and they'll work together. Each controller can have up to 32 switches or sensors associated with it for 0 to 10 devices, and it goes down to 16 for dolly devices. And the group settings themselves are saved on the controllers. So this is done through Bluetooth between your phone and the device. So you do need to be in Bluetooth range when you're adding and removing devices. You can add new groups with the plus button on the top right. And just like the devices, if you hit the sun's icon, you can control the group. If you hit the gear icon is where you add and remove devices. So if you hit that gear icon, it'll go to this screen where you can hit the plus button to add devices into the group. You hit the minus button to remove devices in the group. And our sensors usually have an arrow icon next to it, as you can see the kitchen sensor does. And if you click this arrow icon, you can add the motion sensor or the daylight harvesting sensor, whichever one you want. There's also a group automation settings on the top right, circled in red. This is where you can set the sensor settings for all controllers in the group, so you don't have to go one by one and changing the settings however you want it to be. You can do it all at once through this page. So this is the group automation settings page for motion sensors. Again, it applies the setting to all controllers in that group. You can have up to 3 different motion sensor settings. As you can see here, it says period 1 from 0 to 2359, which means that this setting works for the entire day. But if you change that time frame, you can have 2 other motion sensor settings. So maybe from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. you want the lights go full blast, but after work, you want the lights only to go to 50% when motion is detected or something like that. So you can set that in here. We also have something called manual override, where the controller won't listen to any motion sensors being triggered for that amount of time. So say I hit the switch to turn off the light in my office. The motion sensor won't trigger for another 10 seconds if that's the manual override time, and won't turn on that light for 10 seconds, for instance. And that is at the bottom over here. And if I hit this period 1 button, the letters themselves, it'll take you to a different screen where you can set the settings for period 1. Each of our motion sensor settings has 3 levels of control, meaning that you can choose between when someone arrives, do something, when someone leaves, maybe set it to 50%, and then some certain amount of time afterwards, turn them all off to 0. So those are 3 levels of control. You can see this icon over here is where you can change the time. So if you wanted that 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. setting, this is where you would enter that. You can hit the gear symbol here, and you can change what happens when someone arrives, when the motion is detected. You can set it to like 50%, 100% intensity, or a previous state. If someone dimmed the lights using a switch, it'll go to that same dim level. And then for daylight sensors, it's the same thing. You can set this in the group automation setting. We have 2 different daylight settings, open loop and closed loop. Open loop is used for areas that have incoming daylight. So you're able to configure 2 points on a graph. The intensity, depending on how much lux level the sensor is getting, it'll go and dim down the lights to a certain intensity. So we use a graph to kind of choose how intense the lights, how bright the lights are. And you can have more than 2 points on the graph. You can have multiple points. For closed loop, it's more like having the light at a certain level and keeping it there always. You have 3 ways of doing it: maintaining current light level, identifying a desired light level, or just entering a sensor lux value. So this is mostly for if you want the lights to always go back to this state, even if someone dims the lights using a switch or their app. And this is how they would do it. We also have something called scenes. You can access this page using the scene button, or sorry, spaces. You can access this through the spaces button at the bottom, circled in red. Spaces are basically a bunch of groups grouped together. So you're able to add multiple groups into a scene, and it's just an easy way to control multiple groups. This the spaces setting, the settings aren't actually saved on the devices, so it does save a little bit of time. When you do change the light intensity of a space, it actually sends out the command to both groups, or however many groups in that space. So for example, I have conference and kitchen in the space. If I turn off the lights in the space, the app will actually send 2 different commands, one to turn off the group for conference and one to turn off the lights in kitchen. So it's just an easy way to group a bunch of groups together. Next are scenes. Scenes are preset intensity and color tuning levels that you can just invoke with a push of a button. The scenes tab is at the bottom here in red. So that's where you can access this page. If you hit this power button, that's how you invoke the scene, and the lights will change depending on what you set. If you ever see this retry icon, it actually means the scenes weren't saved successfully on some devices. So you can actually hit this icon for troubleshooting, and it'll try to save the scene again in those devices. And of course, if you hit the gear icon next to the scene, you can access what devices are in that scene and go to this page. So you can see in the scene, conference and reception were added to the scene. You can add devices through groups or individual devices by clicking the icons at the top and go back and forth between them. If you hit the sign icon next to the group, you'll actually change the scene for that entire group, and that's the setting there. So if you want different settings for different groups, you can do it this way. Or you can click the sun icon at the top right, and you'll be able to apply this setting to all devices in this scene to make it easier so you don't have to individually go one by one and try to make them all the same. We also have something called scene animations, which lets you cycle through different scenes throughout a day. It's in the same page as the scene tab. And instead of adding a scene, you would add an animation. For these animations, you can set a runtime and a fade time, and then have multiple scenes run throughout the day and have them repeat if you want. So if you want something with a circadian rhythm and have the color tuning of your lights change throughout the day, this is kind of how you would do it. You're also able to set some schedules. The schedules are located in the More tab at the bottom right. And when you're setting a schedule, you can set them to repeat for certain days in a week or just at a certain date. And you're going to be invoking a scene through this schedule. So you need to set the scene first, and then you can set the schedule to invoke that scene. Schedules also have something with a manual override, and schedules with manual override enabled will return to the scheduled state after the override timer. So if I have this setting enabled and someone pushes a switch to dim the lights, after this override time, the lights will go back to that scheduled intensity and state. Yeah, so that's most of our features in our app. It's pretty simple if you guys just try it out once. I'm sure you'll get a hang of it. For now, I'm going to go to my app and kind of do a quick demo of everything I just said and kind of show you guys how, I guess, simple it is to do. So I'm going to switch over to my phone. It's not working. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So this is the page you see after you log in. It's just a blank page on the Devices tab. If I hit the plus button on the top right and hit Add Devices, this is where you can commission devices. You can see the commissioning settings in green right there. If I hit the gear symbol, this is where I go and see the pre-commissioning settings, where you can enter in your security code or output channel settings. If I go back, I'm going to tap here to search for any devices. Again, I'm looking for devices that are in pairing mode, which is the time, the minute after the devices are powered up. So if I power up my devices here, you can see 3 devices, a sensor, a controller, and a switch. So to add them, I'm going to hit the plus button next to each of them. So right there, the app was talking to the device and telling it to commission into this account. And the app was also talking to our server on AWS and saving those settings on the server. So when you're commissioning devices, you do need internet connection. And this is the only time you really need internet connection for our system to work. This page is showing that I can change the CCT levels if I wanted to. I'm just going to hit skip. And once commissioning is successful, I could actually change the name of the device if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to add it to a group later. So I'm just going to add these devices here quickly. As you can see, commissioning devices is pretty fast and easy. All right, and that's it. So I'm going to hit X on the screen, and you can see all 3 devices that are added. If I hit the sun icon next to the AF10, this is where I can control the device. If I hit the Groups tab at the bottom, I can now add devices to Group 1. So I'm going to hit the gear icon. I'm going to add the controller first. So hit the plus button next to the AF10. And I'm going to add the switch now. Hit the plus button next to that. For the Cyrus AM, which is our motion sensor and daylight harvesting sensor, I'm going to hit the arrow next to it and hit the plus next to the motion sensor. So now the motion sensor of the Cyrus AM will talk to my controller. This message here is just asking if you want it to have group automation settings. I'm going to click yes. So this is where I can change my manual override and if I want to have multiple periods. If I hit the period 1, I can now change my settings. So when someone arrives, go to 98%. And if I go down more, I can see when everybody leaves, I can set it to wait for 20 minutes, go to 50%. And if I scroll down even more, after another 20 minutes, the light will turn off. And I can remove this last part if I wanted to by just hitting the tab here. And now it'll just go to 50% when someone leaves or no motion's detected for 20 minutes. And if you just wanted a vacancy sensor, you can actually turn off when somebody arrives as well. So if I turn this off, it'll be a vacancy sensor now. Okay. Now I'm going to go back and back again. Now I'm going to hit the arrow icon on the Cyrus AM and add the daylight sensor. Again, this message is for the group automation settings. I'm going to hit yes. If I hit the pencil icon next to sensor details, I can go and change my daylight harvesting lux numbers. I can change it in this page right here. Yeah, so that I just quickly added a controller, a switch, and a sensor, associated the switch and the motion sensor and the daylight sensor to my controller. So now the controller will listen to both devices. So if I exit out here, I can go to Spaces tab at the bottom. I can add it to a space if I wanted to. I hit the gear symbol, hit the plus. It's now in the space. And if I go back, if I hit the sun icon, I can now control this entire space, which is just this one device. If I hit the Scenes tab at the bottom, I can configure my scenes. I hit the gear icon next to scene 1. I can add group 1 to that scene. And if I hit the sun icon, I can control what happens. Let's say I turn the device off when I invoke the scene. I can rename it using the pencil icon at the top. So just name it off. So now if I exit, go back out of this page, whenever I hit this power button, the device will turn off. And now lastly, if I hit the More tab for schedules, the schedule is at the very top. I can go into schedule 1, repeat for a few days in a week. At 1:30, choose the action of off, and I can save that action. And I can also have an end action if I had more than one scene. So now at 1:30, this device will turn off every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And yeah, that's it for the live demo. I kind of went through everything that I showed in the PowerPoint just really fast. So yeah, that is kind of it for the webinar. We can go through some of the questions if people had any. We do have a next webinar on March 7th at the same time. We're going to be going through how to commission a layout yourself, kind of go through the process of what happens when we get a layout from you guys and what happens during pre-commissioning. Yeah, we can go through any questions that were typed out. At one time, wasn't paying attention.
I don't see anybody who posted questions, Jonathan. If anybody has questions, you don't just jump right in. Let's we don't want to leave questions unanswered, of course. Well,
like no one's volunteering.
No, going once, going twice. Sold 1995. Oh,
Yeah.
there's a question. Do you have a build out sheet that we can give our customer to? If I have 16 million devices. No, there's two questions. Yes, you have just 60 seconds to pair all 16 million devices, and if you can't, it's too bad. Now, you really, there's a kid in India that was able to do that, so we figure everybody can.
Yeah. So the devices, if a device is already in your account, it won't show up in the scan again. So technically, you can just repower the devices, hit the really large breaker switch you have them on, and turn them off and turn them back on. And the ones you've already added won't show up. So you can very slowly add all 16 million devices. And good luck with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and project management 101, go in and create the login, create your buildings, name them exactly what they are, like a big college campus, name those buildings appropriately. Then go into the drawings and on each floor, name the rooms. Those will be your zones, your groups. So from that point forward, it just becomes a matter of, project management 101.
Yeah, for the build-up sheet, like what a desired setting for an office, it really depends on the state you're in and the energy code. Like for instance, maybe your energy code requires people to be manual on, auto off after 15 minutes. So yeah, it kind of just depends on the customer. Usually it's just when someone comes in, set it to a previous state. After 15 or 20 minutes, turn off. And that usually is okay for energy codes.
Yeah, each state is going to have their own energy codes. The California, New York's tend to be the most, and Washington tend to have the roughest ones, or the most comprehensive. Whereas in other states, they're not so comprehensive. So, stringent. Yes, good word. In fact,
Yeah.
we're attempting to get somebody from Energy Code ACE. By the way, for those of you who do not know Energy Code ACE, and you'd like to know what Title 24 is. Title 24 is a California specific code for in commercial lighting and controls. They are a great resource. They offer free certification and free training. Yeah, a great place to go and learn about what's going on in California. If you're each state may have their own resource like that, but I do know that the Energy Code ACE is a great resource for those of us in California.
Yeah. And I just ran through, like, in 30 minutes, basically what you need to know about our entire system, how to commission things and configure things in 30 minutes. And this will suffice for like 95% of all your projects. So our system is pretty easy to use. Yeah, and if you ever have any questions, of course, email Michael and he will answer you within a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm standing by. I that's what I do for most of my day. I just stand right here at my computer. So don't hesitate to reach out. You could call or email me. If you don't have my cell phone number, let me give that to you. It's in the chat right now. That's my cell phone. Here is my email address. love to hear from you. All the feedback we can get. We're on the process of reaching out to as many distributors and electricians as possible. So for our rep agencies, we want to open the door and help familiarize and then empower your people to be able to quote this with confidence. So thanks for showing up, you guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining, everyone.
All right,
We can
have a great
call it
night.
there. No more questions. Yep. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.